morning, welcome to the Daughter Arise channel. My name is Yvonne and this channel is all about bringing you content to do with sexual abuse. I share my experience of sexual abuse on this channel to inspire hope in people, to encourage people and to give support. I also share news stories and articles that I come across regarding sexual abuse to highlight and raise awareness, because in this day and age in 2019 it is still seen as a taboo subject. But I wanted to come on here quickly today and just give my thoughts on the Surviving R. Kelly docuseries that aired on Lifetime in the USA earlier this week. It was a 6-part docuseries and I managed to watch it on YouTube. It wasn't a great copy, but I managed to watch it on YouTube. And you know, my timeline has been flooded with loads of videos, like recommended videos and stuff have been coming up around this docuseries regarding R. Kelly. And I've heard lots of people's different opinions and the discussions that are going on around it. And you know, whilst it's tragic and sad that this has had to have such a terrible impact on the victims, who for a very long time have had to face all kinds of accusations, especially the ones that were underage, about, you know, their motives and all the victim shaming that is going on. I think the positive thing that can come out of it is all these discussions and that people can learn something from it. So from watching it, there are 3 things that I feel that we can all learn from it. For people who don't know anything about sexual abuse, this is a perfect time to learn about it. So the first thing that I picked up in the documentary was about the music teacher, the one when he was very, very young. I think he was about 7 or 8 years old. And she was talking about his talent and how he was gifted in music. But she said that when he used to write lyrics and do his songs, they were quite aggressive in nature. They were quite explicit as well. And she said when things are going on with children, that they express it, especially through music. And when she heard the lyrics, she said to him that he couldn't use that type of language, that he would have to change the language in his lyrics because it wouldn't be acceptable in school. Now, if we were just looking on that in today's context, if a child was doing that in school today, I would like to think that the teachers would be asking probing questions to the child about where they are picking up that type of sexually explicit language. Because if you don't know, one of the indicators and signs of sexual abuse in children, or could be an indicator of sexual abuse in children, is sexually explicit language. At no point did I hear that, you know, she kind of maybe probed him gently in a way that he could understand where he got those lyrics from, or that she reported it to the teacher or had a conversation with his parents, you know. And considering this is going back in the 70s, I can understand that. But at the same time, it's like if you are a teacher and you've worked with many children, you know, giving music lessons and stuff, and you've never really come across a child who's doing this before, I would like to think it is cause for alarm. And I'm not saying this to blame her, because the mindset back in the 70s was completely different. As a child who grew up in the 80s, who was being sexually abused by my dad for 5 years in the 80s, there was no adverts or any kind of campaigns or information around childhood sexual abuse. So I can see why she didn't say anything, but at the same time, it is cause for alarm. So there are warning signs to look out for in children that are going through sexual abuse. And here is just a few of them. Avoidance of being alone with a certain family member or friend, fear of going to certain places. The child could be frightened of the perpetrator of the abuse, reluctant to socialise or be alone or around them, show sexually inappropriate behaviour for their age or use sexually explicit language. Also, there are physical symptoms, and that could be soreness in the vaginal or anal area, unusual discharge, STDs, and pregnancy. These are just some indicators that a child could be going through sexual abuse, and it's very clear in R. Kelly's case he was going through this. Now, I'm not for 1 minute sticking up for R. Kelly. I'm just using this as an example to show you that he was indeed going through some type of sexual abuse and it wasn't picked up on. I myself have gone through sexual abuse. I've known many people through my work with Daughter Arise who have been sexually abused, and there is no way that I could reason or understand how somebody who's gone through sexual abuse can go on to then sexually abuse somebody else. It's very, very difficult and hard for people who have been through it to even be able to recognise and acknowledge it to themselves, let alone sexually abuse children. The second thing that I picked up on is about the amount of people that knew what R. Kelly was doing, saw what he was doing, and said nothing. I'm going to leave a link in the description bar below, because on my blog, Hope in the Future, which is on my Daughter Arise website, just even a couple of months ago, I talked about this same topic. In the UK, in London, and the people who I work with and who I'm contacted by from survivors around the world, the amount of us who were sexually abused, who our parents knew what was going on, or people around us knew what was going on, and they did absolutely nothing to help us. Don't ever think for 1 minute that if you keep quiet about sexual abuse, or you suspect it's going on and you do nothing, you don't act upon those suspicions, that you are not guilty. You are guilty. And I know this is not going to be popular, especially within the black community. There is a lot of complicit silence, denial, and enabling. People enabled R. Kelly for over 20 years by their silence. This is what has allowed him to get away with it for so long. His power, his influence. It has allowed him to become the man that he is today. And that is a paedophile. And, you know, the people in that documentary that are coming forward now and talking about really need to think about that. What they could have done to highlighted people to what he was doing. That was something that came across very clear in the documentary. The people that enabled him, that by their silence. If you know somebody is going through sexual abuse, or you suspect it, you have a moral duty to do something about it. In this day and age, we're not in the 70s or 80s anymore. There are plenty of organisations, you know, all around the world. In USA, you've got Darkness to Light.org. Over here, we've got NSPCC. There is an equivalent, I hope, in most nations where you can call, you can even do it confidentially, to report your concerns. It is not for you to say, oh, I maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. It is about helping that child to be able to get out of that situation. The police and other organisations that have enough expertise and experience to be able to pick up on if a child is going through sexual abuse. Regardless of whether the child says anything or not, there are organisations and the police and different places that will pick up on that. So it's not enough to keep quiet, it's not enough to be silent. In the black community, as I said, it is a huge problem, and it's a problem in all communities, but I'm speaking as a black woman, a black survivor who's gone through sexual abuse. When I spoke out, my family ostracized me for speaking out. You know, denial and complacency is real, but it's funny, years later I find out that they always knew, because incest ran in my family, and incest runs in a lot of black families as well. And silence and complacency, sometimes because it's all they know. Nobody has ever spoken out before. It's something that's passed down the generations. But regardless of whether it's going on within a family environment or it's somebody close to the family, we all have a duty to report it. It's the morally right thing to do. It is the equivalent of being the Good Samaritan. If you don't know that parable about the Good Samaritan, it was about somebody who helped somebody basically in their time of need. Some people walked by, some people didn't do nothing when they saw the man beaten on the side of the road, but the Good Samaritan stopped, helped the man, paid for him to get medical help, made sure he was all right. This is our equivalent of being a Good Samaritan. If you know or suspect a child is being sexually abused, you have a duty to report it. That is being a Good Samaritan. Another thing that was really interesting is in the docuseries with R. Kelly was the brother Kelly, who spoke out about his sexual abuse. Now, he's done a number of, well, a couple of interviews that I've seen on YouTube sharing his experience and mine. I just really want to take my hat off to him, because as a male survivor of sexual abuse, it is doubly hard for men to come forward and admit that they were sexually abused as children, just because of the way society perceives males, that you're supposed to be strong, you're not supposed to cry, no one's supposed to overpower you, forgetting actually that whether it's male or female, we all start as children. And there's no way, whether we are a boy or a girl, in our little state, that we can overpower an adult. There is no way. The power and the dynamics of control are basically in the adult, the perpetrator of abuse's favour. And he shared on the documentary that he wanted to speak out. He wanted to speak out, and he said that he wanted to tell his mum that he was going through sexual abuse, but how he wanted to test it was by telling Robert R. Kelly that he was going through sexual abuse. And he said that this would be the test, whether, because if he believed him, then he knows that it would be all right to speak out. It would be okay to go to the mum. But then when he spoke about it to R. Kelly's brother, he said that he didn't believe him. But here's the thing. Both of them were being sexually abused by the same person. Now, from what I've seen online, apparently it was the older sister that was sexually abusing them. But isn't this so strange that you have two children both being sexually abused by the same person, and one is in denial even though they're going through the sexual abuse, and the other one wants to speak out? A lot of children who are going through sexual abuse or have been through sexual abuse as children often isolate themselves in their experience, meaning that they will keep it to themselves or that they might deny it. And from that, he said, he decided not to speak out. But look at that, years later, they both now know that they were sexually abused. And this is the case. What you need to understand with paedophiles is that they never just abuse one. We look at R. Kelly and we can see from his behaviour over the last 25 years that he has sexually abused many young girls. David Finkelhor, who is a leading researcher, and I refer to him a lot because I've read a lot of his work, he's a leading researcher regarding childhood sexual abuse, says there's 4 preconditions that somebody must overcome in order to sexually abuse a child. They have to be motivated to abuse a child, they have to overcome inner inhibitions, they have to overcome external inhibitions, and then break down the resistance of a child. And Professor David Finkelhor says that if one of those 4 steps are not there, then it is more than likely that the person will not go ahead and look for somebody to sexually abuse. But as you can see from R. Kelly, all 4 were there. He was stalking out that Chicago schools, you know, he's found his victims, he's overcome his inhibitions, and he's gone on to sexually abuse young girls. What happens is that the perpetrator always makes the victim, the survivor, feel like they are the only one that they are abusing. They're very good at that, because in order for a paedophile to sexually abuse a child, they have to inoculate that victim. They have to make that child feel like they are the one that they have chosen, that they're special, that they deserve all this unwanted attention, to inoculate them. And then after a while, what they do is to try and secure the child's silence, obviously sometimes using gifts, some bribery. We see that in R. Kelly's case with the gifts to the girls and the promise of studio time and singing sessions. This is how paedophiles work. And there are studies that have been done where one paedophile has abused hundreds of victims. This is how they work. And by being complicit in silence and not doing anything, all you're doing, or if you are doing that, is fanning the flames. I can probably say that there are many of us out here that know at least one person in our family, in our social circle, that has been sexually abused as children. If anything can be taken from this documentary is that silence and denial is no longer an excuse in 2019. If you know that a child has been sexually abused, you have a moral duty to report it. There is no excuse. And what I want to say to you, if you are somebody that has been through sexual abuse as a child, that you are not alone. You know, there are organisations out here that can help you. In the UK, as I said, in London, I run Daughter Arise. And, you know, that's a peer support organisation to help survivors of sexual abuse. I also done a TED talk on how we can empower survivors, so I will leave the link in the description box below. If you're somebody who has people in your family or friends or social circle that have been sexually abused as a child, check out this video that I've done with my TED talk, because you might be able to find information in there that will help you to support your loved one or family or friend. I have written 2 books on sexual abuse. The first one is Daughter Arise, which is my story, which was released in 2010, about what happened to me in my childhood and how I went on to recover from sexual abuse. And my second book, Choose Life, which is released next week on Amazon, is a self-help practical empowerment workbook. If you're somebody that's been through sexual abuse as a child, you might not be at a stage where you want to talk to anybody or go to a support group or attend therapy, and I wrote this book with you in mind. It has practical exercises in there for you to do. Do you actually know, just in general, that loads of people who have been through sexual abuse don't even realise what they went through as a child is even that? So that, again, is why I've wrote this book, you know, to bring education and awareness around sexual abuse. The practical exercises, poems along my journey, and affirmations that I've wrote to encourage you, and diary entries from a particular period in my life to show you the journey that I had to go through to healing. And sexual abuse is something that takes a long time to heal from if you don't tell anybody about it. It can affect your life in so many different ways. So check out the R. Kelly, Surviving R. Kelly docuseries if you can. I will leave links to everything in the description box below. Take care.